Welcome, guys, to episode 175 of Radio 815, the podcast dedicated to examining the work of writer director J.J. Abrams, as well as his greater Bad Robot universe. I'm your host for this time around. My name is Marcelo Inostroza, joined as always by my fellow co-host, Matt Crandall. And on today's edition of the show, we will continue to make our way through the short-lived TV series Undercovers. Today, we'll be talking about episode 11, entitled The Key to It All. So, Matt, I have a question for you. What's in the safe deposit box?
A MacGuffin. A MacGuffin is in the safe deposit box. A thing that even when we find out what's in it, nobody knows what it is. And then Sam says, I know what it is, but I don't really know what it is. And it's a MacGuffin. We're just chasing another thing. Now, we're in the home stretch here. Last week we said goodbye to Lizzie. She's not in this episode. You were right. She seems gone. We've got a mission that, the Blooms are brought into while they're on vacation, and they are not supposed to be involved, but there's some Americans involved in a terrorist situation, and they have to go. And then it turns out there's another operative and another secret, and mystery after mystery piling up. I like that the Blooms get involved while they're on vacation, and as they're going, they realize there's another agent there and something else is going on, because that's what we've been waiting for. We've been waiting for the Kelvin shoe to drop. But so much of this episode just feels like episode of the week, where we're with these bad guys who are doing something bad and the Blooms have to intervene, that I was like, isn't this where we're supposed to be kicking the serialization into high gear? Why are we just doing another week to week episode like we have been, except for like the last 10 minutes? So I was getting a little bit frustrated by the time it was done. Again, the next two are the final two that never aired. So like, I'm really excited to see how they take it and what the end game is. But so much of this episode just felt like more of the same, up to a point that I was really surprised. That I would think if they knew the show wasn't going to be lasting, this is where you take the gloves off and you just go for broke. And it really doesn't feel like they've done that.
For me, I think I have a different take on this than you do. But for me, this episode addressed a lot of the issues that you and I have had for weeks on end now. But it's really interesting that this episode didn't play well for you, because I kind of appreciated the ice cream on top of the souffle. The souffle being the serialization, the larger mystery of this episode. Because if I'm being honest with you, I did not give two shits about this terrorist organization kidnapping an entire room of individuals. But when I found out that this terror organization didn't give two shits about the people that they were kidnapping, but a CIA officer that had some connections to the bigger overall mystery of why the Blooms got brought back in the first place, that really played well for me. So I really feel that the mystery of the week and the greater all mystery of the series, unfortunately, were tied together really, really well. The one thing that I really enjoyed in this episode, or the other thing that I really enjoyed in this episode, I should say, is I've been complaining that Hoyt had too much of the love for Steven, right? He basically idolized the guy, and he wasn't really progressing as a character in the series. But I feel that this episode allowed the character to show his appreciation for Steven, but when Steven needed him, because basically, if it wasn't for Hoyt, Samantha and Steven would have died in this episode because they get captured at one point. So I really feel I really like the way that the writers took Hoyt and finally gave him some fucking balls. And he may still be a kiss ass for Stephen Bloom, but I really like the moments of Hoyt being this series is Benji, for lack of a better word.
I agree. I think Hoyt was pretty good in this episode, and he was toned down, right? Like, he wasn't just cracking jokes and being goofy guy. He got to do some stuff that was a little bit more serious, and it worked for this particular episode where, we need someone to get the Blooms out of a jam, and thankfully it wasn't Leo. And Shaw, again, has just been relegated to, like, he's doing the restaurant thing and sorting out their inspection. And I'm like, I really wish that in these final episodes, we get Shaw more involved with the Blooms on the ground, because I love Gerald McCraney. I think he's so good that I want to see him really involved, and I want to see him with the Blooms and Hoyt doing everything. And if we have to bring Leo, then fine. But I hope that we get a little bit more of that dynamic, because him just always being on the phone or doing other things just feels like a waste of a great actor who's not getting the chance to really show off in the show. Now, by the end, when Kelvin shows up and takes the thing from the Blooms, like, I feel like the door is open for, like, these two character actor old guys to maybe show down later. And I'm hoping that we can get something a little bit juicier, just because I keep feeling like this show is only going for it now. Like, before we were going like 50%, and now we're like up to a 70% on the overarching story. And I'm like, dudes, you're out of time. Ramp it up to 100. Crack this shit open and let's fucking go. So I just keep waiting, and the terrorists are capturing America. I'm like, I don't care. I just don't care. I'm so checked out, and I feel so bad. But again, this is a show that is only on a few small streaming services, so I have to log in to a Tubi to watch it through a VPN on my computer. And so it's not the optimal, viewing experience. I'm a guy who loves the turn off the lights, let me get my big screen going, and I can really get into a story. And I think part of that might be detracting from the way that I feel about the show. And also, because we are doing it for a podcast, sometimes watching the show feels like work. And I'm like, this shouldn't feel like work to me. And there are moments that I do like. So even, when I love when a character actor or somebody before they were big and famous, like, pops up. So one of the agents in, like, one scene is Max Greenfield, who was Schmidt on New Girl, but this was a year before New Girl, and up until that point he had only been Leo on Veronica Mars. And so, like, he's a guy who hadn't been in a lot of stuff. He pops up in Undercovers for one scene, and I'm like, holy crap, it's Schmidt, who ends up being on, one of the most popular sitcoms of the last 15 years, New Girl, and is a really funny guy. He just pops up randomly as a agent for no reason on this, and that made me happy. And I'm like, okay, I like, those are the moments I like that don't feel like work. But so much of the main story, I just want more of the characters doing stuff rather than the action, because the action is not that compelling.
Would you have preferred if this episode was episode 12 right before the finale? Because midway through this episode, I'm like, you know what this episode feels like? This episode feels like setup for the finale. But we're not there yet. So you mentioned in your comments that you feel that they're going 70. You mentioned in your comments that you feel like they're going at 70%. This episode feels constructually like it's going at 100, but it's just placed in the wrong spot.
Right. Well, and like I said, the last 10 minutes is where they really start to realize that they got a story that they got to conclude. And so the episode does open with a flashback of Sam and her old mentor guy on a mission, and his car blows up. And then by the end, we find out that that's part of the reason why Sam has been brought back at all, because when they do have their run-in with Kelvin and he takes what we know to be, this key, he says, we didn't bring you back just to go rescue dumbass Leo. Like, there were other things going on, and this is it. We need this key, and we've got it. See you later. And then Sam says, I knew what that was because on this other mission 5 years ago, Buddy put the key in Operation Nocturne, And we start adding stuff that by the end, I'm like, okay, I'm getting interested. And then we see an analyst is listening into Sam and Steven having this conversation. And then I'm also getting more interested because I'm like, all right, why are they listening into their private conversations? What more do they need from the Blooms? And how are they going to get it out of them before this whole thing is wrapped up?
I found it really interesting when Mr. Calvin had a conversation with Shaw, and I really thought that Shaw was going to have an issue with Mr. Calvin not kind of wanting to tell the Blooms about the real reason that they were there, because here's the thing: at the end of this mission, Shaw has a confrontation with Steven, and Steven basically tells him that if you do not brief us in full with any missions that you want us to do moving forward, we're going to fucking walk. Now, that to me sounds like a threat. It is a threat. So, do you think that Shaw's decision not to tell him the real reason why he and his wife were called back to the CIA is going to come back to bite them? Not to mention the bugs that Matt just mentioned that are in their house now. So I cannot see any other way forward for this show to end up in a happy spot. Like it's not gonna end happy, because in the next episodes, Sam and Steven are gonna find these bugs. They're gonna talk to Shaw, and they're gonna fucking quit. There's no way on the fucking earth that these two people who have integrity up the yin yang are gonna stay. No way.
I do think they are leading us to them quitting in protest finale that, again, if it had been picked up, they could have brought them back eventually into the fold. But it is interesting that they do say to Shaw, like, hey, if you don't give us all the pertinent information before you send us in there, you're fucking with our lives, and that's no good. Because when they are on that mission and he meets the other person who he knows is a CIA agent, he's like, it's the old Mission Impossible. There was another team. Why is there another team here? And so you wonder what's really going on if there was a second team brought in. And I liked when they did say to Shaw, like, hey, you can't pull that crap with us, because it shows that they've got a bit more autonomy than they have had. And even though they are kind of threatened, like, you only were on vacation if you ever say you were here, like, that'll be the end of that. I did like that they aren't so passive, and they are starting to realize that the people they are working for are keeping secrets. And anytime there's a shadowy government organization that is keeping secrets from their agents, that's never good. So I'm excited to see where we could be taking that. And especially knowing it's a J.J. Abrams show, you know, we've had a show in Alias where for so long, Sydney Bristow thought she was working for the good guys. She thought SD6 was a good organization, and it turns out they were bad, right? So I'm wondering what kind of thing we can do to pull the rug out from us and the Blooms in these last two episodes, and hopefully make it pretty memorable if they can find a way. You know, it doesn't have to Shyamalan. It doesn't have to be like a jaw-dropping twist, but I would like something that maybe makes this stand apart and a little bit more creative than just being what we have gotten so far.
I found it to be really naive if Steven and Sam think that when they came back into the fold for the agency, that the agency had to give them all the answers that they needed for them to stay safe. That is absolute. If that was indeed what Sam and Steven would believed would happen once they came back, that's absolute fucking lunacy, because they work for the most crooked organization on the planet. Name me another organization that's more crooked than the CIA. And and I'll give you a gold dollar. So I hope that's not what Steven and Samantha have in the back of their heads. I hope that their Boy Scout mentality, or their Girl Scout mentality in this case for Sam, isn't that stuck up their ass. Because if it is, they deserve to get what's going to happen to them eventually in these last episodes. But if it's not, then everything I just said is all well and moot. The other part about this episode that really ticked me off, which I want to get your opinion on. Last episode, one of the best scenes was between Lizzie and Sam, and it was basically Lizzie telling Sam that she's going to move on with her life, and she's going to take some responsibility with her life, and she's going to go traveling with her boyfriend's band all over the globe. I don't like the fact that Sam still believes that Lizzie's going to come back and she's going to fall back, and because she's going to fall back, Sam doesn't want to replace her spot in the kitchen or within the company that Sam has with Steven, which is Bloom Catering. The fact that Sam sort of didn't have faith that her sister was going to be able to put her life together or build a new life for herself with her drummer boyfriend and God knows where really pissed me off.
It's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, because it did seem like she was accepting her sister with all her faults, but accepting that she had come a long way. And then by not wanting to replace her because she thinks there's a good chance she might be coming back, it kind of undoes all that progress from last episode. So I was a little bit frustrated by it, but I also am not quite sure if they maybe are teeing that up that Lizzie is going to come back and that's why they mentioned it. So like, is she going to come back with her tail between her legs and a broken heart by the time this series wraps up?
If Lizzie does come back, the one thing that would make it persona non grata for the Blooms never to come back again is if when Lizzie comes back, the Blooms are in the middle of a mission. And for some reason, unbeknownst to me, Lizzie comes in the middle of in the middle of Samantha and Steven doing their thing, and Lizzie dies. That for me would be a true point of no return for both of them, because that could serve on 2 levels. Number one, it would be a heartbreaking moment for Sam to finally show her sister who she truly is, and number 2, because Samantha and Steven tried to do the right thing often in literature and life, people who try and do the right thing get fucked over. It's the bad people that stay fine, but the good people, it's the bad people that stay fine. The good people always get killed and always have to suffer first. Do you like my theory here, or my writing rigmarole?
I liked it up until you killed her. So I do think having her come back, while the Blooms are in full spy mode and Lizzie is like, what in the fuck is up with my sister and my brother-in-law? These are not the catering company people I know. Some shit has been kept from me. I think that would be a good way to go into this final, episode or 2. I would like Lizzie to know, it's the spy show trope where like you always wish that at some point somebody will find out. So every show you're waiting for the people who don't know, like the show Chuck. I'm waiting and waiting for certain people to find out that Chuck is a super spy. And every week you're like, why has this person not found out? Like, how do they not know? Why do they think this dude just works at an electronics store? And so at some point I would have liked for Lizzie to get thrown into the mix. And even if it happens where I've mentioned this before, but if Sam and Steven were on a mission and then it happened to involve Lizzie by accident. So like now that she's on tour, they end up having to go to some concert to infiltrate something and get whatever MacGuffin from some guy backstage. And while they're doing that, Lizzie comes around a corner backstage and they are not able to talk their way out of it in a convincing way that then piques her radar and shit happens. Now, if this show wasn't so light, then yeah, we could do the she ends up dying as a result. But I think this show is too light to hit that, especially when we've only got 2 episodes left, that if they were to do something super dramatic, like killing off a supporting character, it would just feel like a stunt. Only because the writing seems to be on the wall at this point, I think.
The other beat that I think will be quite nice, and I sort of chastised Hoyt for doing this for doing this forever because he has love for Steven in such a unbelievable manner. I would love it if the final interaction between him, Steven, and Samantha, he goes, Samantha Bloom instead of Mrs. Bloom, because that's something that I've been wanting. There are times that I'm okay with it, but there are times that I'm like, dude, you're a fucking grown adult. You are a professional spy. Give the woman the respect she deserves, please. But look, at this point, that's high pie in the sky. But I like where your head's at because of the tone of the show. My solution would seem forced, depending on how they do it.
Well, and if this show, we'll certainly be able to speculate once we're done where they could have taken it and what they could have done. But you mentioned it would be nice if Hoyt finally gives Sam the respect she deserves. And I think if this had been a long-running show, there would maybe be a moment where the rose-colored glasses came off and Hoyt had a dilemma where he was realizing that Steven was not this agent that he's put on a pedestal, and maybe he had to drop a dime on him, and that would be like a really emotional, thing that he had to wrestle with. And that would have been interesting to see such a goofy character as Hoyt have to, do this moral quandary where his hero has crossed a line and he needs to report it. So I would have liked some more of that. But again, this is just the 10 p.m. you're falling asleep and you're watching this lightweight show kind of show. It's not going to be giving you very many vegetables. It's just popcorn.
In the Bad Robot lexicon of shows and TV and Bad Robot everything, would you put Undercovers on the low spectrum or the high spectrum?
It's in the lower portion, but I guess the higher of the lower tier, because there is a few other 1 season, 2 season Bad Robot shows that would probably be below. And again, it's mostly just because I love the leads, and mostly because of Parks and Rec. I love Ben Schwartz, and so him as Hoyt, I do enjoy hanging out with that character. But so far, we would never put this in the same conversation as an Alias or a Lost or a Fringe or a Felicity or a few countless others. So it would definitely be bottom tier, but I would say higher range of the bottom tier.
For me, I'm not necessarily going to take my own question down that route. I have seen so much potential in this show. I see potential boiling up in the bottom from the writers, but it took them so long to put the fucking show together, or to understand what show they wanted to make in the first place. But by the time they put it all together, like me and Matt have said, for countless weeks now, the network had enough. The network cut the show's legs off before it could do anything, which is really, really unfortunate on when you think about it at the end of the day. And I would love to see this show done by Bad Robot today.
Right.
Because if this show was done by Bad Robot today in a tight 10 or tight 13, depending on the writers that you get, I think it could be fantastic.
It could be, and again, it would be entirely different because it would be a streaming show where we would do a cliffhanger every week and you would want to watch the next episode because the serialized part of the story would be much stronger. And it would really want you to watch the next episode immediately. And they were trying to get away from that because Lost and some other shows got too bogged down in mythology. But immediately after that, it switches back where everybody's like, no, the thing we want is serialized. And even if they were doing this for network, maybe now it would be the standalone thing, but they would also need a concept that could run, like Law and Order style, 24 episodes a year for 15 years. And I don't think that's exactly what they have here. So it's tough. It was the wrong time and the wrong format. But if you launched this show today and made a few tweaks, it could be successful, especially with, a charismatic, hot, sexy, young black cast as the lead. Like that's a network person's dream where they're checking boxes and you're like, this should work. This should be a huge hit, especially because, you know, the thing about Bad Robot, the concepts are always great. And it is sometimes, unfortunately, the execution in the long term falls off. And we hate to point it out, but, you know, JJ worked on this for like 3 episodes. He came up with some stories and then left and let the guys in the room and everybody else do it. And sometimes you just need boots on the ground with the main guy. And every time JJ sticks around, you can tell because the quality is higher. Sometimes they do take a misstep, but it doesn't feel like something that derails the show. But that can't be said once he leaves after these shows are established. And even you can tell there's a certain point in Alias where you're like, J.J. Abrams has left the building, right? And you're like, okay, this sucks. Even though the show is still fine, it's just like if you watch The West Wing, there's a moment where Sorkin leaves and the show is never the same, and you can tell. And so some of these guys, they do enough work that they can coast, and the show can be like a B+ because of the work they did early. And this one, it felt like the groundwork was there, but they didn't have a well-drawn map, and we're kind of just coasting, but we're not coasting to a B+, we're coasting to like a C-.
All right, guys. And on that note, I think that'll do it for this edition of the show. But listen, if y'all like the work that we're doing here and you want to reach out to us, there are several ways to do that. First, you can email us at radio815@AOL.com, or you can reach out to us on X or Twitter, whatever you call it these days. We are at JJUniverse815. If you want to discuss anything Bad Robot with me, you can also reach me on Twitter or X. I'm at CreekFanatic88. But if you want to try and find the ever elusive Matt Crandall, how can they go about digging you up, Matt?
The best way in general is on Letterboxd, letterboxd.com/MDC3000. Once in a blue moon, I'll post on Insta, but Letterboxd is the way to go.
All right, guys. So before I say my closing remarks, I would like to thank all of you who have found our show. We have 1 new subscriber on our YouTube channel. So thank you so much for subscribing to us. And I hope that we have stuff in our back catalog that you like. And I hope that you will stick around for the future episodes that we do. But with all that said and done with, as I say every week, thank you so much for listening. And as always, we'll talk back soon.
Radio 815 is a Balloonhead Productions presentation in association with Killer Newt Productions.